Marcus wiped the sweat from his forehead as he guided his hover tractor through the cornfields of Nuterra. The binary suns cast long shadows across his farm, painting the golden crops in shades of amber and crimson. After 20 years of terraforming this planet, he had finally achieved what his grandfather could only dream of back on Earth: a thriving agricultural settlement on the edge of known space. The communication array crackled with the usual morning reports from the orbital stations. Trade ships would arrive next week to collect his harvest, bringing news from the inner colonies and perhaps a few luxuries his family had been missing. Life was good, peaceful even, despite being so far from civilization. That peaceful morning shattered when Marcus heard the crying. At first, he thought it might be one of the settlement's children who had wandered too far from the residential district. The sound was high-pitched and desperate, like a baby in distress. But as he followed the noise deeper into the corn maze, Marcus realized the cries were coming from above. Something crashed through the stalks ahead of him, leaving a trail of broken plants and scattered earth. Marcus shut down his tractor and grabbed his rifle from the cab. Pirates occasionally raided the outer colonies, and he wasn't taking any chances with his family's safety. The crying grew louder as he approached the impact site. What he found there defied everything he thought he knew about the universe. 3 small creatures lay tangled in the destroyed corn. No bigger than house cats, but covered in iridescent scales that shifted from deep purple to brilliant gold in the sunlight. They had elongated necks, membranous wings folded against their sides, and large eyes that sparkled with unmistakable intelligence. One was clearly injured, a wing bent at an unnatural angle, while the other 2 nuzzled against it protectively. Dragons. Impossible as it seemed, Marcus was looking at baby dragons. The escape. Marcus worked frantically through the afternoon, loading supplies into his cargo hauler while Sarah packed emergency provisions and Emma helped tend to the dragons. The injured one was already showing remarkable improvement, its wing healing faster than should have been possible for any Earth creature. "Dad, they're getting bigger," Emma whispered, as she fed the dragon strips of synthesized protein. It was true. In just 24 hours, they had grown noticeably, their scales becoming more vibrant and their movements more coordinated. "Growing and learning," Marcus murmured, watching the green one study the mechanical workings of the hauler's engine with obvious intelligence. Every few minutes it would look up at him with those ancient-seeming eyes and cock its head as if asking questions he couldn't answer. As the afternoon wore on, more details of their escape plan fell into place. Marcus had contacts in the Underground Railroad that helped colonists disappear when corporate interests became too oppressive. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a xenobiologist who had been blacklisted by the consortium for her ethical research practices, maintained a hidden sanctuary in the asteroid belt where free researchers could work without corporate interference. The challenge was reaching her before Hayes returned with reinforcements. Marcus had just finished loading the last of their supplies when the green dragon suddenly went rigid, its scales shifting to a dark, almost black color. The other 2 dragons immediately moved to flank it, all 3 staring intently at the sky. "They sense something," Sarah said, coming up beside her husband with their emergency travel packs. "Animals always know when predators are coming." Minutes later, the distinctive whine of military engines filled the air. But instead of the 3 vehicles from that morning, an entire squadron descended toward the farm. Hayes hadn't been taking any chances. "The back tunnel," Marcus said urgently. Years ago, he had dug an emergency exit from his storm shelter that led to a hidden hangar where he kept an old survey ship. It had been meant as protection against natural disasters, but today it might save all their lives. The family and their dragon guests made their way through the house to the basement access. The tunnel was narrow and dark, lit only by emergency phosphor strips Marcus had installed during construction. The dragons moved through the confined space with surprising grace, their scales providing their own soft bioluminescence in the darkness. Behind them, they could hear vehicles landing and military personnel spreading out to search the property. Hayes was being thorough, but Marcus had built his escape route well. The tunnel emerged in a natural cave formation nearly a kilometer from the main house, where his modified survey ship waited in a concealed hangar. The ship was old but reliable, a Pathfinder-class explorer he had purchased surplus from the Colonial Authority years ago. Marcus had modified it extensively for agricultural survey work, but its original long-range capabilities remained intact. More importantly, it had military-grade shielding and a cloaking system that could hide them from consortium sensors. As they prepared for departure, the dragons clustered around the ship's environmental systems, apparently fascinated by the life support machinery. The green one pressed its snout against the atmospheric recycler, and suddenly the air quality readings jumped dramatically. Whatever these creatures were, they seemed to have an intuitive understanding of technology that bordered on the miraculous. "Marcus," Sarah said quietly, monitoring the communications array. "Hayes is getting angry. She's threatening to arrest us for harboring stolen corporate property." "Let her try," Marcus replied, running through the pre-flight checklist with practiced efficiency. "By the time she figures out where we went, we'll be halfway to the belt." The Pathfinder lifted off silently, its stealth systems engaged from the moment they cleared the cave entrance. Marcus kept the ship low, following the contours of the mountain range to avoid detection. Behind them, searchlights swept the sky as consortium forces tried to locate their quarry. It wasn't until they broke orbit that Marcus allowed himself to believe they might actually escape. The dragons seemed to sense his relief, purring softly as they watched the stars wheel past the viewports. Emma sat with them, gently stroking their scales and singing earth lullabies that seemed to calm their obvious nervousness. The journey to Dr. Vasquez's sanctuary took 3 days. During that time, Marcus learned more about his passengers than he had thought possible. The dragons were incredibly intelligent, quickly mastering the ship's basic computer interface by watching Emma play educational games. They showed an almost magical ability to improve any system they examined, somehow optimizing the ship's engines for greater efficiency and enhancing the life support systems beyond their original specifications. More disturbing were the dreams. Each night, as the family slept in the ship's small crew quarters, Marcus found his dreams filled with images that couldn't possibly be his own memories. He saw vast crystal cities floating in space, beings that looked like larger versions of his dragon companions working alongside humans in laboratories filled with impossible technologies. He witnessed the moment when everything went wrong. Corporate raiders attacking the crystal cities, dragons and humans alike being captured and enslaved, entire civilizations reduced to corporate assets. When he woke on the 3rd morning, the green dragon was watching him with an expression that could only be described as knowing. It touched his hand gently, and Marcus understood that the dreams weren't random. They were messages, carefully transmitted memories that told a story his conscious mind was only beginning to grasp. "You're not just lost, are you?" he whispered to the creature. "You're refugees." The dragon's response came not in images, but in emotions: grief, hope, determination, and an overwhelming sense of gratitude toward the human family that had chosen to help rather than exploit them. Dr. Vasquez's sanctuary was hidden inside a hollowed-out asteroid, camouflaged to look like nothing more than another piece of space debris. The docking bay opened as they approached, revealing a sophisticated research facility that the consortium would never think to look for in such an unremarkable location. Elena Vasquez herself was waiting in the hangar as they landed. She was a small woman with wild gray hair and eyes that seemed to see everything at once. Her reputation as one of the galaxy's most brilliant xenobiologists was exceeded only by her reputation for defying corporate authority when ethics demanded it. She took one look at the dragons and gasped. "Impossible," she breathed. "These are Synaxi, but they've been extinct for over a century." "Extinct?" Marcus asked, helping his family and their passengers disembark. "Wiped out by corporate raiders looking for their biotechnology," Dr. Vasquez explained, approaching the dragons with obvious reverence. The Synaxi were among the most advanced species in the galaxy. They had developed biotechnology that could revolutionize everything from space travel to terraforming. But instead of sharing it freely, they were hunted to extinction by companies that wanted to own their knowledge. The green dragon stepped forward and touched Dr. Vasquez's outstretched hand. The xenobiologist's eyes widened as she received the same kind of mental contact Marcus had experienced. "By all the stars," she whispered, "you're not just Synaxi. You're the last of the royal lineage, the genetic carriers of your entire species' accumulated knowledge." Marcus felt his blood run cold. "That's why the consortium wants them so badly." "Not just wants them," Dr. Vasquez said grimly. "Needs them. The Synaxi biotechnology could give the consortium complete dominance over the galaxy. With their genetic memory, these three younglings carry the technological knowledge of an entire civilization." Emma, who had been listening with growing concern, spoke up. "But they're just babies. They can't even fly properly yet." Dr. Vasquez smiled sadly. "Synaxi mature rapidly when they feel safe and loved. Give them a few more weeks and they'll be adult-sized with access to their full inherited memories. That's what the consortium is counting on, capturing them before they're old enough to defend themselves or make their own choices." "So what do we do?" Sarah asked. Before Dr. Vasquez could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Emergency lights bathed the hangar in red as her assistant's voice crackled over the intercom. "Dr. Vasquez, we have multiple consortium ships approaching. They've found us." Marcus looked at his family, then at the three dragons who had trusted him with their lives. Somehow, Hayes had tracked them down. But as he watched the dragons' scales shift to brilliant gold and their eyes blaze with sudden determination, Marcus realized that their escape was about to become something much more significant. The last survivors of the Synaxi were no longer running. They were preparing to fight back. The green dragon touched his hand one final time, and Marcus understood with crystal clarity what was being asked of him. The dragons couldn't reclaim their heritage alone. They needed allies, humans who would stand with them against the corporate forces that had destroyed their civilization. Marcus Chen had started this journey trying to save 3 lost baby dragons. Now he found himself recruited into an ancient war for the future of freedom in the galaxy. The revelation. The consortium ships surrounded Dr. Vasquez's sanctuary like metal sharks circling wounded prey. On the main display, Colonel Hayes appeared with a cold smile that promised nothing good for anyone involved in harboring her quarry. "Dr. Vasquez," Hayes's voice echoed through the facility's speakers, "you are harboring stolen corporate assets. Surrender them immediately, and we might consider leniency for your past crimes against consortium interests." The 3 dragons stood perfectly still in the center of the hangar, their scales now blazing with patterns of gold and silver that seemed to pulse with their heartbeats. Marcus could feel something building in the air around them, a kind of energy that made his skin tingle and the hair on his arms stand on end. "Elena," Marcus said quietly, "what exactly are they doing?" Dr. Vasquez was monitoring the dragons with her portable scanners, her face growing more amazed by the second. "They're accessing their genetic memory. The stress of being hunted is triggering their maturation sequence. In another few minutes, they'll have access to their full heritage." Emma stepped closer to the dragons, seemingly unafraid of the energy crackling around them. "It's okay," she said softly. "We're not going to let them hurt you." The green dragon turned to look at her with eyes that now held depths of ancient knowledge. When it spoke, its voice resonated directly in their minds with perfect clarity. We are Kithara, last of the Synaxi royal lineage. We carry within us the memories of 1,000,000 years of our people's wisdom. But we are young, and wisdom without courage is meaningless. Will you stand with us, humans of Earth? The mental voice was accompanied by a flood of images that took Marcus's breath away. He saw the true history of the galaxy, how the Synaxi had once worked alongside dozens of species to create a golden age of exploration and discovery. He witnessed the rise of the consortium as a military force that conquered worlds and enslaved entire civilizations in the name of profit. And he understood, with shocking clarity, that humanity was next on their list. The terraforming projects, Sarah whispered, her face pale with sudden understanding. They're not just preparing worlds for human colonization, they're preparing human worlds for corporate control. Your species has qualities the consortium fears, Kithara continued. You adapt quickly, you bond across species lines, and you have an inconvenient tendency toward rebellion when pushed too far. They planned to contain you before you became a threat. Dr. Vasquez stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overriding her caution. But if you have all this knowledge, why didn't you fight back before? Why did your people allow themselves to be conquered? The dragon's mental voice carried profound sadness. Because we believed in the goodness of others. We thought that beings capable of intelligence would choose cooperation over domination. We were wrong. Our cities fell because we could not imagine that another species would choose to destroy rather than learn. Outside the sanctuary, consortium ships were beginning to position themselves for an assault. Hayes had apparently grown tired of negotiation. Dr. Vasquez, her voice crackled over the communications array, you have 5 minutes to comply. After that, we begin cutting our way in. Marcus looked at his family, then at the dragons who had somehow become the most important beings in his universe. What can we do against an entire fleet? Kithara's answer came not in words, but in action. The dragon spread its wings, now nearly adult-sized, despite its apparent youth, and began to sing. The sound was unlike anything Marcus had ever heard. Not quite music, not quite language, but something that spoke directly to the soul. The other 2 dragons joined in, their voices weaving harmonies that seemed to make reality itself vibrate. Throughout the sanctuary, Dr. Vasquez's equipment began to glow with the same golden light that suffused the dragon's scales. Computers operated at impossible speeds. Manufacturing systems created materials that shouldn't have been able to exist, and the facility's defensive systems upgraded themselves with technology that was centuries ahead of human science. They're sharing their knowledge, Dr. Vasquez breathed. Not just with us, but with our machines. They're teaching our technology to evolve. Marcus felt the change in himself as well. His understanding of engineering and agriculture expanded exponentially as Synaxi memories merged with his own experience. Sarah gasped as her knowledge of logistics and resource management grew to encompass entire star systems. Emma laughed with delight as she suddenly understood the mathematics of interstellar navigation and the physics of faster-than-light travel. But the most profound change was in the sanctuary itself. What had been a hidden research station was transforming into something far more significant. Weapon systems of incredible sophistication grew from the asteroid's surface like crystalline flowers. Shields that could deflect entire fleets shimmered into existence around the facility, and deep within the asteroid's core, something new was being born, a seed that would grow into humanity's first truly independent starship. Colonel Hayes must have detected the energy surge because her next transmission carried a note of panic. All ships, engage immediately. Do not let them complete whatever they're doing. The consortium fleet opened fire, their weapons striking the sanctuary's new shields in brilliant explosions of frustrated energy. But the shields held easily, absorbing the attack and somehow growing stronger from it. Marcus understood what was happening with crystalline clarity. The dragons weren't just sharing their technology, they were offering humanity a partnership. Not the kind of domination the consortium practiced, but a true alliance between equals. "This is what they're really afraid of," he said aloud. "Not just that we'll rebel, but that we'll find allies, that we'll build something they can't control or conquer." Kithara's mental voice carried approval and determination. "Your species has already proven worthy, Marcus Chen. You found lost children and chose to protect them rather than exploit them. You risked everything to help beings you didn't understand simply because it was right. That is the quality that will save both our peoples." The transformation of the sanctuary was accelerating now. Manufacturing bays were producing components for ships that existed only in Synaxi memory, while communication arrays reached out to hidden human settlements throughout the galaxy, offering them the same choice Marcus had been given: join the Alliance or remain under corporate control. The response was overwhelming. Colony after colony declared independence from the consortium, their messages flooding the sanctuary's communication systems. Farmers, miners, researchers, and explorers, all the humans who had been forgotten by the corporate powers, were rising up in coordinated rebellion. "It's beginning," Dr. Vasquez said with wonder. "The war for galactic freedom." But even as human colonies declared their independence, Marcus realized that the true war would be fought not with weapons, but with ideas. The consortium's power came from scarcity and control. The Synaxi offered abundance and partnership. Humanity would have to choose which future they wanted to embrace. Emma stepped up to Kithara. No longer a child, but somehow aged by the knowledge flowing through her mind. "What happens to you now? Will you help us fight?" "We will do more than help," the dragon replied. "We will teach you to build a civilization that can never be conquered because it will be too busy creating wonders to waste time on war. Your people and ours will explore the galaxy together, not as conquerors, but as gardeners, helping life flourish wherever we find it." The consortium fleet was retreating now, their weapons useless against technology they couldn't understand or counter. But Marcus knew this was just the beginning. Hayes would return with reinforcements, and the corporate powers would throw everything they had at preventing humanity from escaping their control. That was fine. Let them come. Humanity had found its partners among the stars, and together they would build something beautiful enough to make the old systems of exploitation and domination obsolete. As the first human Synaxi starship took shape in the sanctuary's manufacturing bays, Marcus Chen stood with his family and watched 3 baby dragons who had become the saviors of 2 species. The quiet farmer had become something he never expected to be, the father of a galactic revolution. But perhaps that was the most human thing of all. To find lost children in a field and decide that protecting them was more important than any personal comfort or safety. In the end, it wasn't human military might or technological superiority that had impressed the Synaxi. It was simply the willingness of one farmer to do the right thing when no one was watching. That simple choice had changed everything. And in the years to come, as human Synaxi colonies spread throughout the galaxy, bringing peace and prosperity to worlds that had known only corporate exploitation, historians would mark this day as the moment when 2 species chose cooperation over conquest and built a future worthy of the stars themselves. Marcus looked out at the cosmos through the sanctuary's transformed viewports and smiled. There was so much work to do, so many worlds to explore and protect. But for the first time since leaving Earth, he felt like he was truly home. The dragons had taught humanity to dream bigger than mere survival. Now, it was time to make those dreams real. The injured one looked up at him with eyes that held no fear, only pain and exhaustion. It made a soft chirping sound, almost like a question. The other two positioned themselves between Marcus and their wounded sibling, wings spread in what was clearly a defensive posture despite their size. Marcus slowly lowered his rifle and knelt in the dirt. "Easy there, little ones," he whispered, using the same gentle tone he employed with frightened livestock. "I'm not going to hurt you." The largest of the three, its scales a deep emerald green, cocked its head at his voice. It took a tentative step forward, sniffing the air. Marcus extended his hand palm up, the way he had been taught to approach strange animals as a child. The green dragon approached cautiously, its claws making tiny scratches in the soil. When it reached his hand, it pressed its snout against his palm, and Marcus felt a strange tingling sensation, almost like a mild electric current. Images flashed through his mind, vast ships sailing between stars, beings of incredible beauty and grace, and an overwhelming sense of loss and abandonment. Marcus jerked his hand back, startled. The dragon stepped back as well, looking almost embarrassed. The injured one whimpered again, and Marcus's paternal instincts overrode his confusion. "Your friend needs help," he said, pointing to the wounded dragon. The green one seemed to understand, moving aside to let Marcus examine the injury. The wing wasn't broken, just badly sprained. Marcus had dealt with similar injuries in birds before. Working carefully, he fashioned a small splint from cornstalks and strips torn from his workshirt. The injured dragon remained perfectly still throughout the procedure, as if it understood he was trying to help. When he finished, all three dragons clustered around him, making soft, purring sounds. The green one touched his hand again, and this time Marcus was ready for the mental contact. The images were clearer now. The dragons falling from a great height, separated from others of their kind, scared and alone in a strange place. "You're lost, aren't you?" Marcus said. The dragon seemed to understand human speech, though he had no idea how that was possible. "Well, you can't stay out here. The night hunters will make a meal of you." Marcus had built additional coops behind his house for the various earth animals his family had brought to New Terra. One of the unused chicken coops would provide perfect temporary shelter for his unexpected guests. He gently scooped up the injured dragon, surprised by how warm it felt against his chest. The other two followed as he walked back to his tractor. The ride home was surreal. The dragons perched on the tractor's dashboard, watching the landscape roll by with obvious fascination. They seemed particularly interested in the irrigation systems and the way the crops were arranged in neat rows. The green one kept looking back at Marcus with what he could only interpret as approval. Marcus's wife, Sarah, was hanging laundry when he pulled up to the house. She took one look at his passengers and dropped the wet sheet she was holding. "Marcus Chen, what in the name of all that's holy are you bringing to my house?" she demanded, hands on her hips in the universal pose of a wife who was not amused. "I found them in the cornfield," Marcus said, climbing down from the tractor with the injured dragon still cradled in his arms. "They're hurt and alone. I couldn't just leave them." Sarah approached cautiously. She had grown up on a ranch and knew animals, but these creatures were unlike anything in the colonial databases. "Are they dangerous?" The green dragon seemed to sense her concern. It made a soft cooing sound and lowered its head submissively. Sarah's expression softened despite herself. "They're just babies," Marcus said. "Lost babies who need help." Their 12-year-old daughter Emma chose that moment to come running around the corner of the house, having heard the commotion. She stopped dead in her tracks when she saw the dragons. "Are those real dragons?" she whispered, her eyes wide with wonder. "We don't know what they are," Sarah said firmly, though she was staring at the creatures with growing fascination. "But they're not staying in the house." Marcus had already anticipated that argument. He led his family to the empty coop, which he had cleaned and prepared just that morning for a shipment of chickens that had been delayed. The dragons explored their new home with obvious approval, the two healthy ones helping their injured siblings settle onto a bed of fresh straw. "They'll be safe here for now," Marcus said. "Tomorrow I'll contact the xenobiology department at the university. Maybe they'll know what we're dealing with." But that night, as Marcus lay in bed listening to the soft singing sounds coming from the coop, he found himself hoping the university wouldn't be too eager to take his new friends away. There was something special about these creatures, something that went far beyond their impossible existence. In the darkness outside, the dragons sang their haunting melody to the stars, a sound that spoke of home and loss and the endless journey between worlds. Marcus drifted off to sleep with their voices in his ears, unaware that his discovery would soon attract attention from forces far beyond his peaceful farming community. The next morning brought visitors to the Chen farm, though not the kind Marcus had been expecting. 3 sleek black vehicles descended from the sky just as he was bringing breakfast to the dragons. Men and women in military uniforms emerged, their faces hidden behind reflective visors. Colonel Hayes, the leader of the group, was a tall woman with steel-gray hair and eyes like winter ice. "Mr. Chen," she said without preamble, "we understand you've found something that belongs to the consortium." Marcus felt his blood run cold. The consortium was the loose alliance of mega-corporations that controlled most of the galaxy's trade routes. They were powerful, ruthless, and not known for their mercy toward colonists who interfered with their interests. "I don't know what you're talking about," Marcus said carefully. Behind him, he could hear the dragons making agitated sounds in their coop. Colonel Hayes smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Mr. Chen, those creatures you've found are extremely valuable specimens. The consortium has been searching for them for quite some time. We're prepared to compensate you for their return, of course." "And if I refuse?" Marcus asked. The smile disappeared from Hayes's face. "I don't think that would be wise. These creatures are dangerous, Mr. Chen. They carry genetic material that could be weaponized by hostile forces. Surely you understand the security implications." Marcus looked back at the coop where 3 baby dragons were huddled together, scared by the presence of strangers. Dangerous? They were no more dangerous than kittens. "I need time to think about it," he said. Colonel Hayes checked her chronometer. "You have until sunset. Don't make the wrong choice, Mr. Chen. The consortium protects its assets very seriously." As the military vehicles lifted off, Marcus realized that his quiet farming life had just become far more complicated. Whatever these dragons were, they were important enough to bring the consortium to his doorstep. That meant they were either incredibly valuable or incredibly dangerous, or perhaps both. That evening, as the binary suns set behind the mountains, Marcus sat with the dragons in their coop, trying to understand what he had gotten himself into. The green one touched his hand again, and this time the images were different. He saw vast fleets of ships, worlds stripped bare of resources, and beings who looked remarkably like his dragons being herded into cages. The consortium wasn't here to protect anyone from dangerous creatures. They were here to collect property they believed they owned. Marcus Chen had never considered himself a revolutionary, but as he looked into the trusting eyes of 3 baby dragons who had chosen to put their faith in him, he made a decision that would change the course of his life forever. The consortium could wait until sunset. By then, he and his family would be gone, and the dragons would be safely hidden where corporate greed could never find them. The only question was whether he could pull off the most important escape of his life before Colonel Hayes returned to collect what she considered to be company property.